Back again with another take on Michigan football. Um, Michigan lost 38-21 to Indiana this weekend to fall to 1-2. They now have 3 games played. They're 1-2 with losses to Michigan State and Indiana and a win against Minnesota in game one. In their win against Minnesota, they won 49-24, and everybody thought they were on pace for a great season after that. Well, they lost, as I said, 38-21 to Indiana. Last week they lost 27-24 to Michigan State. Michigan State this week actually lost to Iowa 49-7. So, yeah, that's a big kick in the butt for Michigan. Defensively, in the last 2 games, Michigan has been awful. For Michigan State, Rocky Lombardi had 17 completions in 32 attempts, 323 yards, and 3 touchdowns. This past Saturday, Michael Penix Jr. for Indiana went 30 for 50 with 344 yards and 3 touchdowns. Overall, the Wolverine defense is ranked 67th. Their rush D is 32nd, and their pass D is 104th. Those are all from NCAA.com. Some pretty jarring numbers from both of the last 2 games. The leading receiver for Michigan State was Ricky White. He had 8 receptions for 196 yards and 1 touchdown. For Indiana, the leading receiver was Ty Freifogel with 7 receptions, 142 yards, and 1 touchdown. That's a lot. The Michigan rushing game has been awful after game one. Game one, they were pretty good. 256 yards on 31 carries, which is an 8.3 average. Versus Michigan State, they got a little worse, which was 152 yards on 34 attempts for a 4.5 average. This past week, they were a dismal 13 yards on 18 carries. That's a 0.72 average. That does calculate sacks in, but it's still really bad. The leading rusher versus Minnesota was Hassan Haskins. It was 6 carries, 82 yards, and 2 touchdowns. The leading rusher versus Michigan State for Michigan was at QB Joe Milton, who had 12 carries, 59 yards, and no touchdowns. The leading rusher versus Indiana was Hassan Haskins, who had 6 carries for 19 yards and no touchdowns. Factoring in the sacks that count for rushing yards, the team total of rushing yards this past weekend was 13. That's really bad. Passing-wise, Joe Milton for the first 3 games has been pretty decent, not great. Versus Minnesota, he was 15-22 for 225 yards and 1 touchdown. Versus Michigan State, he was 32-51 for 300 yards and no touchdowns. Versus Indiana, he was 18-34 for 344 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Overall, that's about a 60% completion percentage, 290 yards a game, and 1.3 touchdowns a game. From my perspective, they're not going to win many games with those stats, though. They're decent, but when your defense is getting torched, you're not going to get away with putting up 1.3 touchdowns a game passing. That's just not going to give you any wins. My question is now, at what point does Michigan start to lose recruits? At what point do they start to decommit? Right now, the recruiting class for next year, Ohio State's ranked second behind Alabama. They have 4 5-stars coming in, 12 4-stars, and 4 3-stars. Michigan is 9th in the rankings and has 1 5-star coming in, 11 4-stars, and 9 3-stars. People think that Michigan is trying to close the gap, and they're closing the gap. I think that gap's only getting wider. I don't see it getting any closer, especially looking at the recruiting numbers. I mean, yes, Michigan has more recruits coming in by one or two, but the talent gap is, in my opinion, not getting any closer. And I think Michigan's in a little bit of trouble in the recruiting field because if Harbaugh leaves, like they're talking about him doing, they've said that that's gaining momentum. If Harbaugh does leave, I think a lot of recruits will just drop out and be like, I'm not coming to Michigan. I'll go somewhere else. But Michigan football is in trouble. As an Ohio State fan, I kind of want the rivalry to be back, but at the same time, it is kind of cool or kind of fun to see Michigan back in the dumps of the Brady Hoke and Rich Rod era. Hoping that streak continues of the Buckeyes winning on December 12th. Got a long way to go till then, but it's looking good so far. Right now, I don't think Michigan's got much of a shot against us. So that's my opinion on the stance or on the topic, and feel free to chime in if you have a different opinion, but that's my shot on it.